Hey, it's me, Garrett, and I have my second long-format conversation video done. This time, my guest is Nikita Petrov. He's actually one of my favorite podcasters, and he's done a bunch of podcasts on the topic of psychedelics and altered states of consciousness and how this relates to religious concepts. He's done a series of videos on Scientology, and that's pretty mind-blowing. So definitely check out his YouTube channel. He's currently working on a bit of an experimental creative exercise in the form of a newsletter called Psychopolitica. And his writing touches on some very strange ideas, and that's been a source of inspiration for me lately. So I also highly recommend that you look into that. In our conversation today, we talk about these projects and we talk about how we can stay motivated creatively. We talk about storytelling and how we can find inspiration for stories by looking at our lucid dreams and by looking at some old, unknown, esoteric religious texts. So it's a fun conversation and it's a long conversation. But you'll see that Nikita is really good at articulating these abstract concepts. So I hope that you find this as interesting as I did. Please enjoy. I've always been really into myths and I like stories, and so I want that to be like a big part of what I'm doing on my channel is just talking about storytelling and why we find certain types of stories compelling, and that's something that I'm still learning. But I've been reading a lot of like structural things, and I made a couple of videos on how I understood character arcs to work. And
have you gotten into like Joseph Campbell type stuff?
Yeah. So I mean that's the monomyth, right? I mean there's right. Usually like 8 steps. I think people talk about, I mean there's different ways of like simplifying his work into 8 steps where a character just goes into the underworld or whatever and
right.
and gets the whatever the knowledge and comes back out.
Yeah, I remember I've heard something about like the idea long before I tried to read his actual book, the Hero of the Thousand Faces, and I didn't like the idea at all until I tried reading his original writing, because it seemed too formulaic, too like simplified. Here are these 8 steps, here's how it works.
Yeah.
But then when I read the thing, I don't think I finished it actually, but I really liked the book. My resistance to it was eliminated because I realized that what he's doing is a creative, like he's creating this arc out of reading all of these stories. It's not a simplification of what it is. It's like a next layer of creation. You're using these stories that from everywhere in the world. You're like, to find the common pattern is story writing as well. He's creating that pattern by, adhering to certain rules. You can't, say that he just made it up. There's logic to his argument, but it is a creative exercise. It's not a dumbing down of the thing.
Yeah, I also think when you find things like that, they just become tools that you can use to create. They don't make it limiting, and that's, I'm not a musician, but I know some music theory, and I always meet people who say that they don't want to learn anything about music theory because they just want to like noodle around, and they feel like they can express things better if they don't have any knowledge of like what scale they're in or anything like that. But I mean, there's got to be something there where you got to know the basic rules of like, okay, so this is what people have been doing for thousands of years, and there's some commonalities here with, in music, there's tension and resolution, for example. I'm sure there's something similar with a character arc where there's a weakness and an action and a change, and that's how it's laid out by John Truby, which I fallen in love with, because he does 22 steps, and I mean, it's either those 3 basic steps or the 22 that he's laid out, and you probably skip a couple of them. And then there are also things like these vignettes. Like you could have like a thing that's not really a story, but it's just like a snapshot of something that's really interesting, and maybe that's like a David Lynch thing or something,
right?
Where the structure doesn't matter, or maybe it's important to avoid structure, but I don't know, maybe that's more like an avant-garde jazz type thing. I'm not sure if the analogy's falling apart, but
I really like, have you read or heard Lynch's book Catching the Big Fish?
No.
It's one of my favorite kind of little pieces about creativity and ideas. It's like it's kind of these like a series of vignettes where he talks about his work, his approach to ideas, and propagandizes his transcendental meditation, which he tries to do at every
we should talk about
quarter.
that too.
But I really like his approach to ideas, which to him it's like it's the thing. You just need to pay attention to ideas, and there's a reverence in the way he talks about this. We're nothing without an idea, and what you need to do is just to. He compares ideas to fish. I think he says desire is like bait, and when you really want to make something, then an idea will come, and what you need is to catch that idea, and then you use that small idea that first came to put that on a hook and then catch a bigger fish.
Okay.
And this is all happening in like the ocean of consciousness or whatever. Okay. But his like the reverence that he has to ideas as entities, and he sees himself as kind of a servant to these ideas. You just pay attention, you just listen to what attracts your attention, and you try as hard as you can to manifest those ideas. You write them down. If you have an idea for a painting, you sit down and you paint. And then if you just start doing that, then slowly but surely you'll have more ideas, and the thing will emerge by itself. I tried taking his, there's this website, Masterclass, where I've
gotten an ad for it.
Yeah, I subscribe just because I'm a big David Lynch fan, okay. And he has a course there. And it turned out to be not really a course. It doesn't feel like he's really like teaching you. There are elements of that, but it's mostly just him kind of talking about the same things that he talks when he talks about creativity. But okay. There I forget the number, but he says, here's how you make a feature film. You have an idea and you write it down on an index card. And then when you have another idea, you write it down on a different index card. And when you have 70, I forget the number, 27 of those, you have a feature film. You just arrange them on the table, and you find that some structure emerges out of it, or some plot or something emerges out of it, and that's your movie.
And that's Eraserhead. It's just
right.
Well, I wonder if I have the opposite of reverence. I think I think I'm so insecure with my ideas because I put them up against other things, and so I sort of weigh how cliche something is. Mm-hmm, and so a lot of times when I'm doing something, it's just a response to something that I like, or it's like my own version of something that I've seen before. And I don't even bother to come up with my own ideas, maybe. I'll have to think about that some more. That. I'm not sure.
I'm, on the same quote-unquote journey, and it's a long... One of the things that frustrates me about it is every once in a while I find like an old note that is exactly what I just like decided, or I thought I figured out a month ago or today or a week ago, and I thought this is a great insight, and then I find a note from a year ago or 2 years ago or 5 years ago that's exactly the same thing. And so I'm never sure whether I'm making progress, or like I think I am making progress, but it's like a weird spiral thing where you're getting like you're doing these circles around some understanding, and you're approaching it very gradually. I'm still figuring it out. This newsletter thing is my latest kind of like attempt to have a way to figure it out, like what it is that I'm doing, what I'm trying to do continuously to not, because I've started a million different things and most of them died before they even, anybody saw them. And this is the latest attempt to get it going, sustainable, in some sustainable fashion. I'm writing right now a little, like the next issue of this newsletter, which is going to be mostly answering or reacting to emails that I've gotten. And in the course of answering those, I realized that there has been like a sequence of things that I've been doing. The Psychopolitica thing is the third iteration of a thing that started with me sitting like in a cubicle at an office rewriting a to-do list. I had this like it was like this neurotic kind of compulsion thing where I was stuck at a job that I didn't like anymore.
Yeah, sounds familiar.
It used to be good. Yeah, it used to be good at some point, and then I was just like biding my time trying to save money before I quit, and I couldn't be productive, and so I would like write a number of things that I need to do this day, and then half an hour later I find myself writing a version of the same list while nothing has been done on the previous one. And I would just have this like stack of to-do lists where nothing is crossed off, nothing is checked off. And that carried over even after I quit the job. It still, I had this habit of like, I was trying to be productive, trying to do this, trying to do that. And I would, by the end of the day, always have a stack of lists. Most of them are not, like I've written things I need to do, haven't done any of them. And it's just, I'm just stuck in this planning mode. And I did, at one point, decided that I'm going to turn the next to-do list into a little like creative project. Like I'm going to treat it as a thing that's worthwhile in itself because I'm going to put too much effort into this. I'm going to like make it, create some sort of a design to it or something. And that became a thing that I really liked. They actually did help me actually do some of the things, like do more of the things on this list, I think, because more attention was put into not even the planning of it, but it's like in Buddhism, they have this term cultivating intention. So I was doing that for my chores, basically. Instead of doing the things that I need to do, I would like sort of meditate by doing a little art thing on the things that I need to do. And actually, more of them did get done in the end, but maybe more importantly, I found this like way of turning this mundane part of life of like, I just need to do this, I need to call this person, or I need to buy whatever at the store. I turned that into something that I felt good about because it was creative.
Okay.
And so starting with that, I have been trying to turn more and more areas of life into something that I myself would feel kind of like it's worthwhile because it's something like art, something creative, something interesting, something you're not feeling stuck and doing something boring. You're, approaching even the boring parts of life as a creative kind of endeavor. That to-do list later evolved into, for a while I was doing this like a magazine that I was doing just for myself, a monthly thing where I try to put everything that has been happening throughout the month, the to-do list, the work I was doing, dreams I had, ideas I had, whatever else. And so that became a different thing. And now Psychopolitica is a similar kind of thing. Like the way I'm thinking about it now, at least, is it's like an ongoing effort to integrate my own experiences and, shit in the outside world that resonates with me, that attracts my interest. So anything from like news events to the dream that I had last night, I try to put all of these things on the equal footing. And then when I sit down to write a new issue, I'm trying to integrate all of the shit that's been, running around in my head into this one piece of something. It can be writing, can be drawing, can be writing with drawing. And then I hope that it will be more sustainable than these previous iterations because there's feedback. I know that there are people who are reading it. Some of them are reaching out, emailing me, and me writing, like the one that I'm writing now is other people's emails or communication that become a part of this thing that I'm trying to build. And so it becomes not just my little creative undertaking, it becomes a shared thing,
cool. Okay.
a thing that we're creating as a group. And that is how you create realities, I think.
Yeah, well, I'll have to try that. Yeah, I think a lot of the things I have to do, I don't want to do. And I've seen apps where, the goal is to turn everything into a video game. So you have like little graphical feedback where it's like maybe you just need to do laundry. And so you put that on the thing. And then when you do laundry, you check it off and you get a little animation. And so it's for someone who wants that, like, I don't know, video game related dopamine where it's like, now I'm getting the graphical representation of accomplishing a goal.
Right, a little achievement.
There's one with like little trees that grow, which I think is just supposed to help psychologically, which I never really got into. So, I mean, maybe this will be something that works for me because I do like the idea of making a journal and sharing it.
I had in one of these notes that we exchanged before the conversation, I wrote down something like writing and talking about drug trips and why I sometimes feel more confident doing that than doing something just like purely creative. And the thing there is, like, if you have like a serious psychedelic trip, you don't have to invent anything. Like, it doesn't feel like when I describe whatever ideas that I get out of it or just describe the experience, I feel like I need to be confident in describing all of that just to, give its due to the experience. That there is no place for insecurity because you're trying to put into words something that's difficult to put into words. And so you need to focus on that and try hard on that. And I'm not like making up a story. There's no insecurity about making up a story because it's just a thing that happened. I just need to describe the thing. Yeah, I'm reporting on it. Yeah. And then from there, I've been trying sort of to take steps towards the same kind of attitude towards everything, towards like when I have a good idea, let's even drop the word good. If I have an idea that's compelling to me, that's interesting to me, then what I'm trying to do is do my best to report on that, to, share that with others. And so by removing myself, sort of trying to remove myself from the equation, I'm just reporting on an idea that I had, on a thought that came to my mind, or describing a feeling that I had, or a vision, even if it's like a story or something that to an observer would seem like I sat down and tried to come up with, an arc and everything. Even when you're applying a tool like the however many steps for the arc, you could look at it as, work being done by you to kind of remove the bullshit, to do your best for whatever idea that is behind all of that you're trying to express. And then you're a reporter. It's just you're not reporting on something that happened. You didn't go to a rally to report on what happened there. You are reporting on, the invisible kind of world of ideas and thoughts and whatever visions.
Yeah, that makes me think of something. I wanted to maybe take some of my scraps of stories and stuff that didn't work and just have a character, within his own story, just say those stories. And so those stories would be framed in this other thing, and he would acknowledge that some of it's cliche and some of it didn't make sense or whatever. And
it's interesting, these anxieties and like trying to like one of my favorite writers is the Russian writer Viktor Pelevin, and he always has this like a few layers that often to me seem like extraneous. There's like he wrote a novel, but before the novel starts, there's like one page of just removing himself from this. It's like this was found, you know, this text was found in certain circumstances, and there's always this like taking a few steps away from what you've created. What has been working for me, sort of, is sort of because it's perpetual sometimes, is whenever I treat something I'm working on as an unfinished project that I'm gonna share with people, then I somehow feel better about, like, if I'm like with the Psychopolitica thing, I decided to create a physical, it's a newsletter that comes out, on email with some regularity, but I decided to make this zine kind of thing, a physical little magazine that I will send then to people who wanted it for free. And half of that idea is just to give me the opportunity to put things out there online that will not be perfect, that I'm not completely happy with, but I can share. I have like the opportunity to share that, because I will say, this is work in progress. I'm working on that other thing, and here are the drafts. And in that context, it suddenly, to me, seems fine. And I don't know whether that actually matters to the reader. I think to many readers, it's, in any case, it's either interesting or not. Either you're compelled by the writing of the drawings or not. But it gives me a kind of sanction to share this thing that I feel anxious or protective about, because I can say, this is not the finished work. The finished work will happen sometime later.
Yeah. But that's how everything should be, right? Because you're always going to be working on something else. So there should always be that subtext of, well, this isn't the real one.
Right.
This isn't the magnum opus. Just wait for it. Maybe
that's part of this intuition behind Gnosticism and simulation theory and all that. This whole reality seems like it's not the thing.
Yeah.
It's a simulation of the thing.
Couldn't be, because it's not good enough. Well, for the audience, because I have a really dumb audience, can you explain what Gnosticism is?
It's, in my understanding at least, it's like a collection really of streams of thought that was popular in the first, second, third century. This is like early, a subsection, I guess, of early Christianity. Like, I think the first thing that I've learned about them is this idea that they kind of put the narrative of the Old Testament on its head by saying that the God that we know from the Old Testament is not the real God. It is, they call him the demiurge, the architect of this reality. So he is in charge. He created the laws of this world, but he himself is, I think in some texts they call him a mistake, a miscarriage, like a thing that was not supposed to happen.
Well, that's what I seemed to... it seemed to me that all of it had to do with incompetent gods or a flawed world or something. Is that a good simplification?
I try to like read the actual like source texts, and they're difficult to penetrate. But they have this idea. They do have a notion of like the ultimate reality, and there's a source of everything, like the actual God. They call him the unknowable Father. And that is like a reality. That world is just pure creation, and everything is perfect and how it's supposed to be. And from the source, this unknowable Father, there emanate these, I think emanations is what they call them, these sort of like concentric circles of reality. And the very last of these emanations is something they call Sophia, wisdom. And she's like so far removed from the source that she doesn't quite feel the connection to the source. She doesn't quite understand how to continue this process of creation. And she tries to continue this. They describe what she's done in different ways. In one one formulation is she tried to create without a sanction from the unknowable father. The other version is she tried to know the unknowable father, which is like, that doesn't work, that doesn't happen. So in any case, to me, it sounds like a kind of like a metaphor for, when you're not inspired and you try to create something and you create something that's a piece of shit, basically.
And that's us.
So
or the world.
That I'm a little confused about too.
Okay.
There are, I think, various. It's either like she creates this entity that becomes the god of our world, and he then creates.
There's a hierarchy. Okay.
Yeah. Or there's like one rendition that I've heard is, so she created something, and that something seemed shameful and appalling to her, and that something became this architect, this demiurge of our reality. And the emotions that she flashed through upon seeing this like creation that didn't work out, condensed and became matter. And so it's like our world is made out of her shame and frustration and anger and all of these emotions, and the force that is turning all of that into our reality is this like flawed creation of hers that was just not done right.
Mm-hmm.
And that thing itself is not aware of its own nature. So that entity thinks he is the creator of the universe. There's nothing above him. There's no other reality above him. But he's just blind. One of the fascinating parts about this thing is to me, it sounds like exactly what the simulation theory is for our times, but in a different kind of poetic language.
Yeah, exactly. And so do we just have the same intuition that people have always had, where we just want to believe that we're in this other world? Well, have you read, let me say this before I forget. Have you read Blood Meridian?
Mm-mm.
Because I think that's a Gnostic thing, and I want to do a video on that at some point. It's a weird book. What about Dark Souls? Have you played Dark Souls?
No.
Because
I think I've heard both of these titles, but I haven't.
As Dark Souls is my favorite game, and and this is also why. See, now I'm going back to the personality type of people who have to connect everything to video games. But in the game, you're in this flawed world that's dying, and it's like your fate to go find the old gods and kill them all, and then capture their divinity, as I understand it, and then reset the world using their whatever. So that seemed pretty similar.
Yeah,
although
that
it's kind of a weird story. It's really ambiguous, but it's cool. You should check that out. You might like that.
It's interesting about Gnosticism and simulation theory that, like, those are our theories or whatever metaphors for what we're dealing with, but we also might soon become that blind god that, like, if we create AI that will be conscious, then this Gnostic idea will be just a very descriptive rendition of what is going on. Like, for that AI, the creator of their world, of the reality that they exist in, is like a blind god. It's
right.
like an entity that has created their reality but doesn't know where they came from. And maybe there's like a fractal thing that's been happening like this for millennia.
Yeah, I like that idea. I mean, it's horrifying, but that that's why I like it.
Yeah.
When I go back to David Lynch, I've made a few comics and, well, at least one video where I basically laid out everything I liked and didn't like about it. And I was like, look, this is what I was trying to do. Here's what this is. Here's the metaphor. I was like just putting it all out there. And I feel like with something like Eraserhead, it's just, hey, it's whatever you want it to be. And David Lynch isn't going to say, okay, look at this shot. Right. Here's why I composed it this way. These are the visual codes at work here. Here's how it relates to this other thing. Because then, I don't know, you could judge it as good or bad because he's laid out, okay, here's my goal. Did I accomplish that goal? But when you sort of leave art open to interpretation, I guess people can attach their own meaning. But I don't like that. I want to be very specific. I want to have a structure and an intention with everything. And if someone finds something, they're like, "Oh, that's genius! How'd you?" I didn't, that, sort of like a spontaneous thing. And I would say, "Oh, I can't take credit for that because I hadn't thought of that." But I guess I got lucky with that analogy.
Right.
But doesn't count. Doesn't count unless it was my intention.
That might be one of the differences. I mean, with Lynch, like he doesn't do drugs, but it's almost like he's always on drugs. His way of approaching reality is an unusual one, and I think a big part of what he's doing is he's trying to remove himself from, like, he's trying to be like a conduit to these ideas. I don't know if he takes credit for any of these things that he does, because oftentimes he doesn't. I mean, he definitely knows a lot. It's like you can't say that he just randomly, makes these movies not knowing what he knows what he's doing. He's just not going to tell you most of it.
And it's probably intuitive.
Yeah, but for him it is intuition, and sometimes there's like a rational component to it too. Like he knows how you can see when he talks about these ideas, it's that there's thought in it, and there's an understanding of what he's doing, definitely. But every once in a while he says things like, I didn't know what this movie was about until 10 years after I made it. And then I read, it could be Eraserhead, actually. There's some movie that he was talking about that he finally understood what it was when he read a particular passage in the Bible. But then he said, but I'm not going to tell you what that passage is and what I understood, because this is not, to me, and people complain about this. But he says, you go to a movie and you leave the theater, and then the two people start talking, what did you think? What did you think? And that's, you'll figure it out. You'll figure something out. You'll come up with a meaning of your own, and that's beautiful too. I think whatever works, man. I mean, it's all genres. It's all, whatever compels you is the way to do it.
Yeah, I think my frustration is that I'm trying to learn a craft. And so I want to know, like you were saying earlier, can you gauge improvement? And like, am I on the road to improving? You need some little benchmarks of like, okay, now I have mastered this thing or whatever. And there was something that I was obsessed with for a little bit, where people were arguing about one of the Star Wars movies, which is stupid. But there was this take, and it was kind of a meme where at some point, a lot of big YouTube channels were making these video essays about how everything is subjective, and so it's impossible to say whether or not Star Wars is good or bad. And so I made this really long, because it was part of the joke is that it's drawn out, and so it was just like a really long postmodern rant about why Fast and Furious is like this great art film, and why Adam Sandler is I don't know, he just has all these ideas related to socialism at one point. Like it was all like I compared it to what was it, Foucault? I threw Foucault in there at one point. Really stupid, but what I want, and why I get nervous when I see like talented filmmakers make things that can't be explained. I want to be able to explain it. And then on the other hand, you have these YouTube channels that will come out and say, here's 10 reasons why 2001 Space Odyssey was a good movie. And it's like, I don't need to watch it. I know I watched the film. I know why it's good. I don't need you to tell me why it's good. But I don't know.
I think I'm trying to think about it. do not like the air of, I really don't like people whose only job it is to evaluate other people's work.
Yeah.
I get really frustrated with like a literary critic who has never, especially if it's like, I mean, you can do it well. You can do, I think, criticism well, which would be, you know, when you give, whatever, there's a book and your article about the book allows me to see something in it that I haven't seen before.
Yeah, there's a space for that.
Yeah, but so much of this stuff is just, this is good, this is bad, this is better than the previous one, this is worse than the previous one, I got bored in this, and I don't fucking care whether, you know, unless you're a person who I already care about because you've done something else, and so your perspective is interesting because,
right,
you know, if you thought it was bad, you can explain like what you would do differently, on, you know, you have a relationship to the craft yourself, and you're interrogating the work as the way you would your own work in order to improve on it.
Right.
That's one thing. But these just like, this is good, this is bad, and you're the person whose job it is to just point to what other people have done and to say this is good, this is bad. I get really annoyed with this.
Yeah, I do think that, well, just in general, I think that everyone should, you know, get drunk and play a keyboard and,
right,
you know, try to write your own stories and draw, you know, even if you're not good at any of these things,
right,
in which I'm only good at some of those things some of the time. But I want these critics to put themselves out there. I want a critic to, you know, to have his or her own pieces that are also open to criticism.
And I think it becomes less interesting to criticize stuff once you start doing stuff. Like that's just more exciting to try to to make something than to just look around and evaluate other people's creations. I think I've gone through this kind of like, you know, I'm trying to think when I was 15 or whatever, there was a lot of judgment to like, this is the music I like, this is the music I don't like, this is, you know, this is not true metal or whatever.
Yeah.
And then, you know, you're supposed to grow out of it, I think. I don't know, the place I'm currently in is, if somebody, like, I can put down a work of art if I feel that the person who created it didn't try to do a good job. Like, I get annoyed with people not trying to do a good job of whatever. I mean, I don't know. I think maybe I'll be ashamed of the place I'm in now regarding all this, but
How
like
so?
I can get annoyed. Well, like I was about to say that I've missed all of the like the current Avengers series, whatever you call that. I didn't see any of that. I tried to watch 2 of those movies because I have a friend who works at Disney and he was telling me that it's actually very good. And I didn't like, you know, my perception was that it didn't seem to me like somebody's, you know, work of art, a creative vision of any kind. It seemed to me like a product, like a commercial thing that's not, it's not somebody trying to express themselves. It's not somebody trying to, you know, articulate something that is difficult for them to articulate. It's a packaged commercial product. And that is something that I can, again, I wouldn't write articles though, I think, about how this is bad and this is bad. But this is the thing that does get me annoyed when I go see a movie or whatever. And my perception is it's not anybody's attempt at doing a good job at creative expression or whatever. When I see a movie and it is not actually good, you know, it's a failed attempt at expressing yourself, but I see that my perception is somebody did try and then failed. I have no problem with that person. That's how you do this. This is what you do. You can't do more than that. You just try, and then sometimes it works out, sometimes it doesn't. But if you don't even try, then I can have a problem with it.
Okay. just to defend the corporations, because won't someone think about the corporations? I think the auteur that you're looking for might be Jon Favreau, who kind of started the Marvel universe, and now he's doing the Mandalorian thing, and he's kind of rescued Star Wars a little bit in terms of ratings, I guess. And the Mandalorian show on Disney, which is not a sponsor, is mediocre, but it's also just serviceable, and it's a good product. And so I don't know if he has an artistic vision. I think he's good at what he does. I don't know if the utility of making a movie that also makes money somehow makes it less artistic. I mean, I do feel that could be a thing. I feel like, I haven't monetized any of my art. I basically sold it at cost and given most of it away for free. And it sounds like you're doing that too with your Psychopolitica.
Right. I mean, making money is not a sin in itself.
No, but I'm just trying to gauge how creative Jon Favreau is, because I think he's talented. Yeah, I mean, they do feel more like products that were developed by a room full of Disney board members or whatever, who are trying to plan out merchandise or whatever. Right.
That does make me frustrated sometimes. But just sometimes not succeeding, like trying and not succeeding is even more interesting to watch than somebody succeed. Like with stand-up comedians, that's a thing that if you go to like an open mic and you see a couple people who are good and then 8 people who are not, that still can be a very good entertaining evening, to watch these people try and eat shit on stage. That's at least they're trying. That's a human being actually,
and it's hard
putting themselves out there. Yeah.
Have you seen The Room? The Tommy Wiseau thing. That's the meme of the worst movie of all time.
I've heard about it. Yeah,
is a very earnest attempt at making a deeply personal thing. It's autobiographical, and he's sort of just so incompetent, but just really putting himself all out there, putting it all out there. So maybe you'd like that, but probably not. I don't know. It's about a breakup.
I think I would, based on the. It's like you just need to find a particular, like a day that's good for it. You need to find a mood and a time to get into this.
Or maybe watch it in several pieces, so it's not all at once. But yeah, that's interesting because it's an autobiographical depiction of a breakup that he went through that's sort of exaggerated. But he's still the flawless protagonist who's just, everyone is against him. And he's perfect, and no one gets it, and so there's no self-awareness there. I wish that maybe he would have I don't know, had a more nuanced view of himself and his role and everything.
Yeah, I haven't watched the movie and only heard bits and pieces about it. But did I get the story correctly that it was originally this earnest attempt to make a proper movie, and then when it became this kind of cult classic for being a really bad movie, he tried to spin it that way. That's what I actually was trying to do. It's a parody
he
thing.
said, "Oh yeah, it's totally a comedy," and then he looks really sad every time he says that.
It's heartbreaking.
Yeah, that's also my fear, that I'll just bare my soul and everyone will laugh at it.
Yeah, but that's the risk. That's where you're supposed to risk. And then when that does happen, you can learn from that.
Maybe I would like it though, because all my stuff is tongue in cheek, and I'm always trying to be funny, even when and I don't know if I do this on purpose, but I'll try to, approach something that's real, and then I'll just do a stupid gag. In my videos and comics and everything, it's all just Like, I don't know, it starts to get real and sad, and then it's just like played for laughs. And I think that's my voice, or there's something like that that's my voice. And I was talking about this in the last little podcast thing I did, but I think there's something there. And I don't know if it's a cop-out or if it's like a good way of approaching something that's hard to talk about by being funny.
Right. That's hard to figure that distinction out. I love things that are both. Like that's what I like the most, when something is both sad and funny and scary and non-scary, and like when the more these like opposites that you can merge into a thing, the more I get drawn into it. Like I recently rewatched Horace and Pete by Louis C.K. Have you seen this?
No,
show?
But I think I remember you mentioning it.
Yeah, I talked about it with John Horgan, who since did watch it and really liked it.
Okay.
But that's a great example of this kind of approach when it's... I mean, I laughed at that show harder than at, comedies, and people talk about it as depressing and sad, but when you make... Like, it feels real. There is real sadness and real, drama in it. But when there's humor in that kind of setting, that it does not diminish the drama either, but just kind of accompanies it, then it's really funny to me.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I do find that a lot of the depictions of, let's say, stereotypical sad things in movies or whatever, shows, aren't the way I've experienced it. And maybe I shouldn't get too into this, but there's usually music. The music swells, and it's usually I don't know, like the timing's perfect for everything.
Right.
But often if you're experiencing the death of a loved one, like usually there's like the mundane just sort of gets in, and there's like these little things that ruin the mood, and so it's not really like a cinematic experience. It's just kind of, I don't know, sometimes it's boring or annoying or something like that, and that's not going to look good in a movie. And that's sort of like The Stranger. Like in The Stranger, I read that in high school, and I was an angsty teenager reading The Stranger and getting into existentialism. And I liked, that scene where he's at a funeral and he's just like, it's just sort of annoying being at the funeral. And I don't know, maybe that's sort of the tone that I'm looking for, something that's just kind of awkward or funny at some time. And that just feels more real to me than the cinematic thing that's where everything is that color graded and the music is there.
Yeah, that makes me think of two stories of death, like real personal stories of death. One is from somebody I know, and the guy shared this with me. I think he was able to share it because he was on MDMA, and it's this like traumatic thing that he's approaching to like. And the story was, I forget whose funeral it was his uncle or somebody, some family member, and somehow the people at the funeral, like there was nobody close, like no like father or mother, so he was a child at a funeral of a family member surrounded by other family members, but they were all distant relatives, like nobody who he was really connected to, and he really needed to shit. And he was too ashamed to ask any adult, about this. And so he shot himself at the funeral of this person that he's supposedly, a relative to, but there's no connection to anybody around it. And that's the kind of story, like, I remember him telling this story very, like he's sharing this difficult, hard thing from his past. And I started laughing and congratulating him on, like I said, this is what I call a story that I can relate to. That's interesting. That's a human. I can imagine being you in that moment, and it's a complex mixture of feelings, and it's, that compels me. That's interesting.
Yeah.
And the other is a more a longer thing. But have you heard about these people targeted individuals?
I don't think so. What do you mean?
It's these. It's like what do you call it? They named that themselves. It's a weird thing.
Where they
checked.
Repeat trauma or something?
No, so it's people with delusions of persecution, I think it's called. Like, they think that somebody's watching. That there's like a spectrum of these symptoms. Some think they're being watched.
Like
some
paranoia?
Actually have some have auditory hallucinations. Some think that somebody's planting thoughts into their heads, and so forth. And so it's a condition that has always been present in society. Some people have it, but now with the internet, what happened is, in some of these people's lives is they, you get some kind of symptoms like that. You go on Google and you search for that situation, and you find out that there are other people who are experiencing it. Mm-hmm. And then, so a bunch of these people got together. There are forums online, there are websites online, and they reinforce their, they created a shared reality where these symptoms are, their reality. Somebody is putting thoughts into their heads, mm-hmm. and somebody is, talking inside of their heads, and so forth. And so they have conferences. They have it's a community now of these people who call themselves targeted individuals because they're targeted by some malevolent entity. And so it's a kind of story that I just am interested in. And I was reading about this kind of stuff. I recognize that these are real people with lives, that's part of the reason I was drawn to the story, because there's actual human suffering and confusion and all of these different feelings involved. But it's still, a curiosity for me. I'm just reading this online. I'm not friends with any of these people, right. And so it was something that kind of entertaining for me to observe. And then a friend of mine, we were not very close, but we have known each other for a long time, for 15 years, less than that, 12 years, something like that. And we always liked each other, and we had a good time when we did meet. And though we didn't maintain a close friendship over the years, I always thought fondly of this girl. The end of the story is she hung herself. And the arc of the story is she, was... I don't know how it works, but she started feeling, at first she just felt that people are talking behind her back at the university. She was she came back to a university that she abandoned some years ago to finish her degree, and she felt that it's like a technical university, so it's dominated by men, and so she felt that all these younger men are talking behind her back and mocking her for being a woman and being older than her and this and that. And when she first shared that to me, it seemed plausible, and we just, had a conversation about her experience at the university. And then slowly that progressed into a real full-blown paranoia, mania, where she felt that the world governments and the relatives and everybody was against her. It was this global network of people who are mocking her or want harm to do to her. At one point, she, at one of the peaks of this thing, she thought that every picture of a cat online, every meme with a cat, is a veiled attack on her. And that started in that university. Somehow, cats got associated with women and dogs with men. And so anything about a cat that's kind of funny was a mockery by somebody, of her. Huh. And so I forget why I'm starting to talk about it, but this is the kind of story. Like it's because you talked about how like death and drama happens in real life. There's no
Right.
somber music. I remember when all of that happened. It was a weird feeling to me because I kind of felt, as I said, we weren't like really close friends. It wasn't traumatic for me. And though she was a really good person, I really liked her, and we, as I said, when we met, we had a good time. I always, felt a kind of connection. But my life was not derailed. It was a Thursday or something, and I had other things to do that day, and I carried on. It was not, a world-shattering event. And then on top of that, it was this, like, because I'm curious about weird stories like that, when this happened to an actual person that I knew and cared about, I mean, I don't know how to articulate this feeling, but this sense of like, here's your, the curious shit that you're interested in. Here's it happening.
Yeah, like you felt
in real
guilty
life
for, I don't know, coming in contact with something that you'd been curious about or something.
A little like that, yeah, or not. Well, it's weird because on the one hand, I felt this kind of guilt about previously being amused by stories like that when it's real people suffering
Right.
and
Right.
death in some cases. And at the same time, I don't want to say, that if I choose my words carelessly, I will be ashamed then of that. But there was a part of me that was, I think, enjoying the fact that I'm in direct contact with what I consider an interesting story.
Yeah. Yeah, that's something that most people wouldn't admit to, but it's probably pretty common, Yeah, I don't know if I have anything like that. But I definitely was going to, make a series of jokes about those people until you mentioned that you knew someone who hanged herself.
Right.
So now I do have that feeling of like, oh, well, now you put a face to the phenomenon and it's real now. So now I don't even want to go there.
I mean, but talking about the value, like as I said, I think part of the reason I like those, things like Horace and Pete, where drama exists in the same moment with humor, is because I think that's how life actually is. Like there's not always humor in every situation, but most situations are not one feeling, not one, shade of experience.
Yeah, it's complex.
Yeah, it's part of my interest in like things like Scientology. Like Scientology is a prime example of like it's so weird and ridiculous and so easy to mock and laugh at and point finger and they live in weird shit and all that is true, but they're also real. Like not only they're real people, but in case with Scientology, I kind of get how you get into that, how that can make sense. It doesn't make sense to me, right? I don't see myself becoming a Scientologist, but when I look at how it's structured, how the system is set up, I can see how a person can get enmeshed in that. And that's again this kind of story. Like there are actual human beings that are, we on the outside would say trapped in this weird false reality, but then, they looking from that thing out would say that we are trapped in our false realities.
Yeah.
And they are living the life worth living and saving the planet and all kinds of shit.
Yeah, I don't know if it's luck on my part or whatever, but like I have an aversion to groups. I get really nervous in organizations. So I've never joined anything. I was in Boy Scouts as a kid. I mean, that's the only organization I think I was in. I didn't like it. I didn't like doing the group activities.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I guess I'm dodging a bullet there, or maybe it's detrimental. I don't know. Not be more of like a part of a collective. I don't know, but that's just. I mean, I can understand how people would get into things like that. If you have that personality type, and I don't really make a distinction between Scientology and Catholicism. Is that too edgy?
No,
Does sound like one of those atheists. But
Catholicism is older and has a richer, tradition of art and literature, and
I think I'm just trying to be provocative or something. But I have a friend who was flirting with the idea that he might watch this. Maybe I shouldn't say anything about him. But he was kind of getting into Catholicism for the first time in his 30s, and I was just like, why just just keep doing what you're doing.
Well, does he have an answer? Did you ask him why?
I think it's just a process. I mean, he's still figuring it out, but I think there's something about it that feels good, and I can relate to that. I wish that I could feel good about it. Like if I could go to church every week and feel good about it, I think that'd be great.
I went in Houston. I lived in Houston for like a year and a half. And before I even moved there, like I was on a trip there, and somebody told me that they have this church that is also a stadium. Okay. I think it's called Lakewood Church. So it's a huge place. Like, to me, it's just not such an alien concept. We don't have mega churches in Russia. And just somebody explained that this thing exists. And so I made like, I'm definitely going there. I need to see how that works. And then I didn't until it was like my last week in Houston. I was postponing this thing. And I finally went there expecting it to be fucking weird and spooky and creepy and just like, stepping into a weird parallel reality. And I kind of understood it. It made sense. It's, there's a lot of Christian rock. The show, it's a show.
Yeah.
It's produced pretty well professionally.
It's like a
there
concert.
Are a lot of people. Yeah, it's a concert. And it's like, I looked at people around me and I started singing along to some of it because they have also subtitle, like, you can sing along, they run the lyrics. And I thought, you know what? Saturday morning or Sunday morning, you have shit to deal with during the week. You want a kind of a shot of positivity. It's because it's all about how Jesus loves you and loves everybody and everything's going to be fine. Yeah. And then the way they pray is they hug each other.
Oh, okay.
They have these like huggers that go into like there's the crowd of people.
Designated huggers.
Between the aisles there are these like, I don't know who they are. Maybe they're just like more active members of the church or whatever, but there are like people who you can approach and hug and feel how Jesus loves you through this hug or whatever.
Yeah.
And it was not spooky. It was you could see kids that are bored. You could see I saw like these two kids in front of me who were just like yawning and playing whatever that game is called.
Rock, paper, scissors?
Rock, paper, scissors. They're just like, their mother dragged them there.
Oh, man.
And she's singing along to songs about Jesus and they don't give a shit. But yeah, I don't see myself being a part of anything like that.
But it feels good to
I get why other people do.
And just hug people.
That's true.
I think I was probably 9 or 10 the last time I did it. It wasn't a mega church. It was just it was a pretty big, like, non-denominational church, and it was just singing. And there wasn't even that much, like, of a sermon. It was just like you go there and you sing the Jesus songs, and the words are there and you can sing along. And it's nice. And so I do wonder if I just went through the motions, if I'd feel better. Like without believing any sort of metaphysical claims about the universe or the afterlife, if I just went there and sang songs about Jesus, if that would be enough. And they'd say, do you accept Jesus into your heart? And I would say, no, but I like the songs. I mean, that's a hot track.
Well, it's probably the first step. They probably would say you're on the right track. There's a part of you that is, drawn to this, and you just carry on, continue doing this, and
Yeah.
at some point you'll make the next step.
Okay.
Which is probably true.
Well, this is a perfect segue into your post about the young Jesus stories. Okay, can you just briefly describe, because I didn't realize that this was a thing, but there's like the 5-year-old Jesus, and I guess like the preteen Jesus, and when he was going through, you know, his rebellious phase or whatever, and there are like these
Right.
other stories.
Yeah, well, I'm not in any way an expert on any of this, but yeah, so we have, there are the 4 canonical Gospels, which is just the part that the church leaders decided they're gonna, like, this goes in, and then there's all of these other stories that some are older than the ones that we, consider the part of the tradition, that are, some of them are weird, and there's this one.
So wait, so the one that I read was not canonical?
With the little Jesus?
Yeah.
Yeah, that's not in the, like, if you buy a Bible, that's not going to be there.
Okay, so that's part of the addendum.
Yeah, but I think it's actually one of the earlier written ones that were written earlier. But yeah, I love, there are certain parts of it that I just love. There's one that I really like. He kills, like, I think he goes through like 2 teachers that he zaps. He's a talented child, and the parents want him to learn the letters and everything, and they hire a teacher, and Jesus gets annoyed with this person thinking they know more than he does when he is the fucking God. Mm-hmm. And I think he kills a couple, and then there's one that acknowledges that the child knows more than him, and I wouldn't be able to quote it correctly, but there's something like that, teacher is supposed to teach him letters, and Jesus goes, how are you going to teach me about Omega when you don't even know Alpha or something? Like,
so you have to go in order. I didn't really understand that part either. It's sort of like, start with Alpha before Beta. You haven't
I think it's more than that. I think he's saying that, the way I read it is, you don't even know the first letter properly.
Yeah.
Like, you're gonna skip through it and go like, A, B, C, D, E, F, G. You haven't told me the full story about A because you don't understand the full story about A.
Yeah.
Let me tell you about letter A.
Yeah.
And he actually, I think, explains to the teacher things about this one letter that the teacher doesn't know. And I think it's part of the richer, older tradition. This is me, again, not really educated in this, but I know that in Judaism there's a rich tradition of kind of like theology / magic, Kabbalah, that's related to letters. They, the name of God is a 4-letter word, and if you know the name of God, then you can kind of control reality, because reality itself is made out of sort of symbols or meaning, and you can say it's made out of meaning, and meaning is conveyed through letters. And so if you truly understand the letters, then by rearranging them, by finding meaning in how one letter relates to another, and so forth, you can gain some insight or even control the world. There's this complicated old tradition of thought related to that, and I think that's related here. So you can talk about one letter at length and say, here's what it means, and here's how it relates to other letters, and here's a hidden deeper meaning and whatever. Okay. And so that's not how we're taught in schools, right? You're just, here's the letter, here's say it out loud, moving on to the next one. So I think it's something like that, like Jesus the child explained to the teacher like the depth of meaning within one letter, and the teacher said, I can't teach this child, and I don't know if I should be a teacher at all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then
he kills,
and then does he bring back the other people that he killed?
Eventually he does, yeah.
Just to prove a point?
I think the way the story read to me is that
he was in a better mood.
He was sincerely irritated when he was killing these people, and then he kind of calmed down, and he's like, it's fine, restore them.
Well, that's interesting. I mean, one of the things that I always, and now we're getting into a weird area, but I never liked the concept of an emotional deity.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I feel like if they are, I don't know, all powerful or beyond what a human is, they shouldn't have these like little things. Because to me, like, emotion is a sign of weakness. If you not, let me rephrase that. An emotional outburst
says something about you.
Let me rephrase that. An emotional outburst,
right?
That you later regret.
Right.
Is not good. And so, like, the idea of someone who's all powerful, who still has these little things, like he gets upset because someone rubs him the wrong way, I think is petty and not only human, but like human in a way that's like something that I don't even do often. Like I try to avoid, showing emotion in public. Again, it says something about me, but like if I'm upset, I don't want anyone to know.
God is one of these concepts that you can wrestle with for a long time and have different kinds of interpretation of what that word even means. I had an experience once. I did LSD, and then in the middle of that trip, I decided to try to, I forget whether I tried to chant a mantra or just listen to it, but I definitely put, like, I went to on YouTube and typed in some Buddhist mantra and put that on to see whether it's going to, have an effect of any sort. And it did have an effect. It was one of the very few times when I had anything like that happen to me, which was like phenomenologically, I think you could say that I became a god for a little bit. By which I mean I was a consciousness, like I was aware of what's happening, but I didn't feel attached to the body, to me, Nikita, the entity. So I was aware of things happening, but my identity was completely detached from the human who is sitting at the table listening to the mantra. And I had kind of like, I think people call it out of body experience, meaning I saw the room as if I was above the human, the body. And I thought, like, I was conscious of this whole thing. I knew that I did the drug, and I didn't feel, it was not an overwhelming, like, spiritual thing. It's just like, here's the reality of this situation. I'm aware I can control the human sitting at the table like you control a unit in a computer game, but I'm not the unit. And I thought, if that happened to me, when I would, like, if that happened to a leader of a warring ancient tribe in a desert, and that's how I would get to that state of consciousness, I'd know what to do. I would make this person write shit down, a bunch of commandments, how to rule this tribe, and I would make sure that part of these rules would be to reproduce my existence. Meaning, right? So if you're like Moses writing these commandments down, it could have been this kind of experience where he's being like, coming down from the trip. If I had commandments written down, it would be correct to say that I was told by God to write the following, right? It wouldn't be a lie, because there was some kind of consciousness that controlled me, implored me to write certain things down. In my case, I didn't have anything to say. Like, I didn't have, I didn't have great advice. I was a god in the sense that I was a consciousness that was not attached. I didn't feel attached to the body. I didn't fear death. I was this, like, just kind of awareness floating in the air, but I didn't have God's wisdom or anything like that. So I would really loved at that time to, like, give me some great advice and write down some, I thought, like, this is a great opportunity for me to write some commandments down for Nikita to follow. But, what I'm going to write, exercise every day? Like, he knows he needs to be doing that. He's not going to start doing it because he wrote it down when he was high. So it's just I'm telling this story to say that there's like I can think about, let's say, the God of the Old Testament. He could be real. It could be a consciousness, like you could get high or whatever, do some practices through whatever. I'm sure there are weird, interesting, mystical practices within Judaism that can get you to a different state of consciousness. And it could be that that entity that they're talking about is sort of like their collective, the collective consciousness of that tribe of the ancient Hebrews. That's how they had cohesion within the group. That's how certain rules were written down. It doesn't have to be that way. It doesn't have to be. It could be that nobody ever achieved any kind of different state and just people made it up. But it also could be that somebody did get into these states and that's how some of this thing was written down. And also there might not be a real distinction between the two. Like, if you're writing a story, sometimes you don't know how the story was written. Sometimes you don't know where the idea came from. And there could be, a person just, I don't know, trying to, I don't really know the state of mind of even like, without the altered state of consciousness, but if you're a religious person who is trying to authentically deliver God's truth somehow through your words, your art, like a preacher preaching on in the church, a person who truly believes in what he says, and he at some point starts improvising and feels like it's God talking through him. Who's to say it wasn't God?
Sure. I just I wonder if most people wouldn't have your experience where they exit their bodies and there's no wisdom to be found, and when they're this godly consciousness, they just look down and everything is just matter of fact. It's just there, and there's nothing to I don't know. Proclaim.
if you approach it, just kind of in a down to earth manner, like psychologically, like this is me, Nikita, with my temperament, my knowledge, etc., having this drug experience. I had that experience. A different person would have a different experience in those same circumstances, and maybe a person who's like more anxious would write something that expresses anxiety. Somebody who's driven, who has a mission in life, even in normal state, can go into a manic state and write down real commandments. You need to do this and you need to do that, and especially like imagine if I did write something down in that state that would be in tone similar to those commandments in the Bible, like I am a jealous God, you will not have other gods except for me, and I'm a wrathful God, you will have to obey what I say, and then like exercise in the morning and stop drinking so much. It could be a powerful, it could be a transformation. You could then come down, look at this, it's an intense experience, and then at the end of the experience you're back to normal, but you have these things written down and they're scary and they're telling you to do things a certain way. Maybe you're going to carry on doing those things. Okay.
I just got the sense when you were telling me the story that when you were looking down at yourself, you were just sort of, I don't know, you just saw it as kind of a fatuous sort of, there's the flesh and blood version of that guy that I control, and I don't really care what he does because I'm beyond that now, or something like that.
I actually wanted to be helpful. Like I wanted to
So you were looking for the advice to the divine advice
I was
to pass
like,
down to that. Okay.
What should I write down? I can make him write down anything.
Okay.
What should I make him write down? And then I didn't have anything.
Okay.
Anything wise to share.
Yeah.
I did write something down. I don't remember what, but I think it was just like
do better.
just a description of what's happening, and so what I got out of that experience is just the knowledge that this kind of experience is possible, and then you can think about it and come up with something useful or interesting to say.
Yeah. Well, I wish I could relate to that. I've always had anxiety, so I've always avoided drugs, and like I'll hear from someone like, oh yeah, I had a bad trip,
Right.
And then I think, okay, never doing that. And they're like, oh, no, like you only have a bad trip some of the time. And it's like, well, not worth it for me, man.
Right.
But I don't know. I mean, when I edit these videos, like I've had like kind of a weird experience editing myself, because I've noticed so many vocal tics and little like idiosyncrasies, like things that I do, because I've been looking at myself for hours since I've started my channel. I think I started 3 years ago, and so I go through all my footage, and maybe you've had a similar experience where you're just looking at yourself and looking at what you do sober, but maybe having the same idea of like, oh, well, I'm just an actor and I can control myself and I can do different tics. If I want my eyes to do a different thing, I can do that, and that'll express something else. And so I've kind of gotten used to that, and so sometimes I do think of myself as a character when I'm making.
That's interesting, yeah.
These types of videos, but it's not a psychedelic thing or a spiritual thing. It's just like, oh, I guess I'm that guy on the screen, and I can do different things.
I have kind of, I mean, it's the same experience, and in some way it's the opposite experience, where I would notice these things that I do, and it's usually the things that I notice. Well, I guess I notice both things I like and things I don't like, but it's things that I don't like that really draw my attention. Like, why the fuck do you do this? This is not,
Sure.
And the process of like getting better at this has been a process of removing like these weird tics. It's I get frustrated. What I don't like is when I notice myself being kind of fake or something, like you're anxious, and because being anxious, you're doing something weird that doesn't, I don't like seeing.
Doesn't seem genuine.
Yeah, and so it's a weird thing that I didn't expect that, but seeing myself on video and listening to my own voice after doing an interview like this, when I see something I don't like, I actually become like, it's a way to become more authentic, because what I don't like is me not being authentic.
Yeah, there are also things that just don't read as genuine.
True,
like a lot of times when I'm really interested in something, I might look bored. That's just my face sometimes.
Right.
But then I have to like if I want it to read as interested, then I have to, I don't know, raise my eyebrows or something.
Right. There's that too. It's learning a language. Just like we at some point all learned our native languages. And weird things happen when you try to. Do you know any foreign languages?
I'm okay at Japanese. I lived in Japan for a year, but I'm not great.
Do you notice that you have like a different personality when you speak Japanese?
Yeah, I mean, there are words you have to choose because it can either be masculine or feminine, and you can refer to yourself as the I in probably 6 different ways, which is interesting and kind of fun, because I've always been interested in like those sorts of linguistic things. And you end your sentences with like an exclamatory thing, which is either yo, which would be like an exclamation point, or if you're like a regional thing would be de, or she, which is sort of, I guess, like, I never really figured that one out. It's just sort of like if you're just sort of like trailing off or something, you just sort of like end your sentence with she. And I have like tried to pick things that seem more masculine, but then I heard a bunch of kids on my commute. There were these elementary kids who were talking like that in the overly masculine way, and I thought, oh, it just sounds like you're trying too hard. And so then like a more reserved way would be like a more neutral way of speaking. So like the people to me that looked like these adult Japanese men who were they looked like professionals or whatever, they would use kind of a neutral language. And so for a while I thought, oh, that's cool, I'm going to try that.
Right, that's interesting. That's why I'm bringing this up. There's like, you can learn, like when you learn a language, there's also this process of trying to figure out how to be authentic in that language. Like, what do you're given a toolkit,
Yeah.
and as you're learning how to use the tools, you're trying to figure out what do you want to do with those tools.
Yeah.
So that's true, of language, of facial expressions, of art, of writing, making those comics.
Yeah.
And it's only through doing the thing, like it's only through talking that we learn how to talk.
Yeah.
And it's only through drawing that we learn how to draw.
And to that point, maybe you should develop a southern drawl. When you speak English, maybe you want that drawl.
There are things like
because you said you were in Texas, right?
Yeah, I lived in Houston. I loved how they say "yol." I really like that, word.
Mm-hmm.
I've always wanted to use it, but I never. Like, I've tried, like maybe 2 times.
Yeah.
And I just felt like such a fraud and me. Like, you can't do that.
Yeah, a lot of people where I'm at in California are starting to use it, and it's like it feels forced when I hear it for a Californian to say it.
In California, is it because it's like gender neutral?
Yeah.
And
So it's kind of just a convenient thing to use instead of saying you guys. But I've always said you guys, and I think that guys is gender neutral in my mind, but maybe not.
It's interesting that the political aspect of the language too, like people are trying to.
Mm-hmm.
That does feel in Russia. It's really, I think it's like, for now at least, it's really just a very small group of people who are trying to be this like progressive, careful with their language in this like Western way. At this point, it's Western, but the thing that they're trying to do, you see it in like progressive media. So Russian is a gendered language. Every noun is either masculine, feminine, or neutral. And there are names for occupation, nouns that describe occupation, like teacher, driver, etc., that have never had a feminine counterpart. So like a doctor is just a masculine noun.
Mm-hmm.
So if a woman is a doctor, you use the masculine noun to describe her occupation, even though she's a woman. And so there's now this movement of attaching a feminine end in all of these cases, and that feels, I don't have a problem with the intention, but it doesn't feel right to me, because I think in order to tinker with the language, to try to change the language, you need to have a talent for this kind of thing. You need to be you need to feel the language well, and I feel that most of these people don't have the feeling for the language to do this kind of editing, because there are words. So like, for example, the word for teacher is учитель, and the ending that they add, the feminizing this ending, is ka. So but there's a word that exists already within the language that is a feminine version of that word учитель. So you don't have to do anything with that. There's учитель, the masculine one, учительница, the feminine one. But if this feminine one did not exist, and they applied the formula that they do for all of these other words, they would end up with учителька, which is something that exists in the language, and it's kids being impolite to the teacher. It's like, I probably shouldn't have tried to explain.
So you're saying that the word already exists. So if you want to,
it's like
apply the same rule, you're going to end up with some overlapping terms that are going to be hard to use.
No, they have this one formula that they apply to all of these words to create the feminine version. And the fact is, in some cases, if you do that, you end up with a word that's already exists. That's just it sounds shitty, and that's why within the language it has already become like an impolite way to talk about your teacher. And so that's just an example of how you can't have this like formulaic approach to language, because sounds have a feel to them, and if you just have this like equation like approach to it, you'll miss these intuitive weird little things about the language, and you'll end up with like ugly sounding words, and you don't want that.
Yeah, there's ugliness. There's also like you lose some specificity. Like one of the movements is to use they instead of he or she, but they is plural. So I don't know if I'd rather have the information of the gender or the number of people. I think I need to know, because I don't care if it's, most of the time it doesn't matter if it's a man or a woman, but it does often matter if it's one or many. And so I do want to retain that nuance.
It's interesting, like this thing with they. I don't know whether we had like textbooks that are ahead of the curve or whatever, but when I was learning English when I was like 10 or something, that's how we were taught. That this is just the rule of it. And so I just accept, because whenever you learn a language, there are weird things about the language, and you as a foreigner, you resist, like, why the fuck do you do things that way? That doesn't make any sense. Just pronunciation or whatever. Or every language has like paradoxical elements in it, or you have a rule and then you have things that don't fit the rule, and you're just told, well, this you just need to remember. And so it was given in this kind of context. I mean, there was an explanation, since there's no neutral term or whatever, like you use they, but I just accepted it with all of the other things that you accept about a foreign language when you learn it. And so it's interesting to then see, it's actually a controversial thing. They're still arguing about it. They, haven't decided whether this is how it works or not. But, I've accepted it because that's how I was taught. And then something new will emerge in a language, which I will not accept because, that does not feel like, what I decide is like part of the language, and what's new additions or attempts to change it is pretty arbitrary too.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's one thing if you're learning a foreign language, but when you speak your native tongue, I mean, maybe this is just me, but I speak without thinking.
Right.
So I'm not thinking about what words I'm using. It just happens. It's just, it's just something that happens. It just flows out. So I can't really correct myself. But if I have corrected myself, it's been subconscious, not conscious. I probably have changed some of the things that I say over the years, but it hasn't been because it was
right. You made a conscious decision,
like forced upon me or something. It was just, it's just something that happened. I don't know.
Right. Well, that would be.
It's all organic.
Yeah, that would be my reaction, I guess, to these attempts to change the language. You can change the language. Languages change all the time. But the way to change language is to write a book that's influential, that just, and like it's organic. Yeah, it
catches on you.
Come up with a phrase and you use it, and it catches on. That's how languages change. If you force it, I guess you could do that too. I mean, that can be successful, but I don't like it. That's not how you approach language in my view. It's kind of disrespectful to this thing, the language, that already has wisdom in it and interesting things about it. And when you just talk about anything in Russian or in English, it has different flavors. So you should respect both languages, because they have something, they don't, it's not something that was invented yesterday by some guy. There's richness and beauty and wisdom in it, so you can't just like willy-nilly rewrite it and force it upon people.
Yeah, I agree. I also think if there's something that seems archaic, I mean, you can just kind of laugh about it. You don't need to avoid saying it. You could say, isn't it weird that at the Oscars we have Best Actor and Best Actress? Can a woman not be an actor? Does she have to be a gendered version of that?
Well, that's interesting, right? Because what I just said about the
teachers. right?
Right. The things happening in Russia is the opposite. Like the progressive argument is, she's not an actor, she's an actress. Why
So
do
they
you call
want the
her by
gendered
the
one. I think,
right? Because
I mean, earlier you said I'm not a sociopath. I am, in fact, a sociopath, and I want everyone to live like a robot and just be just like pure utility all the time, and just zeros and ones, just descriptive without any of the flavor that you were referring to. But no one's going to live in my world, so maybe we should just lighten up. Have you heard of what's that like the made up language Esperanto? Yeah. Have you looked into that at all? Like, is that because maybe that one's because that sounds Latin, so that might be gendered too, is it?
I don't know.
I think it's just like a funky version of Latin.
Maybe. I know it exists, but I never tried to pick it up. I saw a website written in a Pan-Slavic language. Like some people tried, like a team of, I guess they're like linguists or whoever, tried to come up with a language that would be understood without previous training by Russians, Belarusians, Ukrainian, Polacks, etc. And that was a weird experience. Like I was reading this thing that's not in my language, but I understood, if not all of it, then 95%
because
of it.
it's all cognates.
What's the word?
Like when sometimes when I hear something in German or Spanish, like it's similar enough to English that it's like, oh yeah, I guess that's just like a weird version of English.
Right. And so they try to find like the common core between these similar languages and make a language out of it. I don't know how, it's a limited test.
You
that
could
I
read
gave
it, but you probably couldn't speak it.
That's true. Yeah. That would require learning. But it's an interesting thing. Languages are fascinating. I want to pick up a new language, but too lazy to do it, and I don't think you can, or I don't think I can do it without actual necessity, without having to talk in it or being really
practice.
Interested in the culture. So in order to watch this TV show, I need to learn it.
Yeah, I mean, and I hadn't spoken Japanese since 2007, and then got a friend who wanted to practice with me a little bit, and it felt good. It was like, oh yeah, okay, getting back into it.
What'd you do in Japan?
I mean, I was just doing electives. I was an art major, and so Japanese didn't really fit into that. So it's just I did a linguistics program, and I just studied Japanese every day.
Yeah, very generic question, but what are some of the more pronounced impressions from living in Japan?
I thought that people seemed to just mind their own business. Like you could be in close proximity to people. I was in Kyoto for most of the time, which is not it's not really dense. It's a nice city, and but still, like if you're on the train with a bunch of people, they're not looking at you. No matter what's going on. And that's so like my personality. It's just like I can't be bothered with whatever it is. Like I got my own thing, keeping to myself. But I know some of my colleagues were trying to just be like, well, I'm in a new country. I want to just meet some people. Just like, hey, good morning. What's going on with your who are you? I'm visiting here. Like, and it's hard to have those conversations.
I would guess, I don't know, I've never been to Japan, but I would guess Russia maybe is in the middle place between America and Japan in that regard. And I remember I rode the bus in Houston to work every day, and it was such a different experience from a Russian bus.
Okay.
People are talking to each other. Like at one point I decided I'm not going to waste this, time of the commute. I'm going to start reading on the bus.
Right.
And I couldn't fucking read on the bus.
People say, hey, what you reading?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's so fucking weird. It never, ever happens on Russian public transport.
Do you think that's nice, or do you hate that? Because I hate that.
Well, I lived in Houston for some time. I went through both phases. It was kind of nice because it's,
Did some interaction.
it's like a tourist experience. Yeah, I get to talk to these Americans. And in Houston, the people riding the bus are mostly black.
Okay.
And most people in my office were not. And so it was interesting because I get to interact with, these people that I wouldn't ordinarily.
Okay.
But after a couple of weeks of not being able to read my fucking book, it started to become annoying. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I also think, one of the things that we might talk about, which maybe just not even get into this, but I do think I had more lucid dreams in Japan because I was so in my own head. And that correlation might not exist, but I think it does. I think when I'm really alone and not talking to a lot of people, that I do have more vivid dreams. Could be wrong. I think that's a thing. There was a month where, I wasn't going to school because we had like our semester break or whatever, like a spring break. And there were just like a couple people that I talked to for a month. And it was weird. Like I would sort of interact with people. Like if I went shopping or whatever, like I have to sort of, you kind of interact with the cashier, but not really. They just sort of like ring up the thing and say the price in Japanese. And that's kind of not really a human interaction. I remember a guy, asking me if like, oh, so is this all together? And I was just like, looking at him like I didn't know what he, and then like, as I left, it's like, oh, okay, now I understood. And so I'm leaving the grocery. I'm like, oh, by the way, I just now understood what you asked me about my groceries like 2 minutes ago. Catch you later. And and then I just have weird dreams because I had a weird, lifestyle for that month.
Right. I would, if I would try to find correlation here, I'd say just living in a different place in a weird, you have stranger experiences in the waking life.
Yeah.
And so in the dream world that needs, would have to be reflected somehow. But your theory works too?
Yeah, I don't know. I just thought maybe it was because I wasn't talking to people that I was like in a different mindset. Or like something was more active because I just wanted to communicate in English with people and I couldn't.
That could be, that makes sense too. Yeah.
I don't know.
There's a lack of communication in this world, so there needs to be more happening. You need to compensate. The psyche needs to compensate for that. Somebody needs to talk to somebody. Yeah, I've been trying. I try to write. I need to get back. I haven't been meditating in months, and it's been weeks, I think, since the last time I've written down a dream, but I'm trying to get back into. I started meditating again, like last week, and I'm keeping the dream journal next to the bed so that I get into it. It helps. To me, it like the way I think about it is, it's actually related to creativity and all those things.
Yeah.
I feel like that example that I brought up with the to-do lists. What I was trying to do is I like put excessive amount of attention into this thing that didn't really require a whole lot of effort. Like usually you just write things down and that's the to-do list. And instead I put like kind of too much into it. And that helped in other aspects of life, including just doing things. And I feel like the same kind of like anything that you do, even if it's not active, like dreaming, you don't, try to dream, it just happens to you. But if you pay attention to that, then you'll have more attention and your skills relating to attention will get better, and everything that you do in life requires attention. Mm-hmm. So whenever I do, there's effort of that kind that I make in any one area of life that improves all of the other ones. So if I start writing down dreams, I'm like more likely to exercise or be more productive at work or something.
Because you're just more disciplined in general, or?
Yeah, there's like some kind of a feedback loop that happens. Like, if I pay attention to dreams then, well, I get better at dreaming. Then I remember more dreams, and dreams actually make more sense. Like they become more coherent or insightful. And I think that means that like whatever processes that are happening in the mind when I sleep are like becoming more effective. Maybe more, thoughts get integrated or experiences kind of processed. And so I might wake up with a good idea, and or feel better. And there is also just this, like, I think there's like, it's like a meta skill. Like any skill that you practice, apart from practicing this particular skill, you're also practicing something. You're practicing paying attention to a craft or this or that. And so that translates to other areas of life.
Yeah, I could see that. And also I just think maybe it's easier to get to the David Lynch thing of, having cool stories to render out. If you just grab stuff from your dreams. A lot of mine are just, weird dreams. And I've also been having more dreams lately. I think maybe because I've been talking about them more. Like I watched like a little documentary on dreams, and then because normally I would never talk about dreams because I think it's like the most boring thing, and that's sort of the cliche of like, it's like
some people say, but I always felt like it's only boring if you don't know how to talk about it, if you can't tell a story.
Well, most people can't. And I'm not sure that I can, because you have to fill in so many gaps to make it coherent. But I've had some interesting ones lately, and I think maybe it's, like I was saying about being alone, because I've been in quarantine. I've only been talking to 3 people for the last several weeks. Or maybe it's just that I've been talking about it recently, and so I'm paying more attention to it and just remembering more. There's been some interesting things that I could probably make comics out of if I wanted to.
Can you give an example?
My favorite one was I'm dating this girl in real life, and then in the dream, I'm going to visit her family at like some family reunion, which I haven't done. And so maybe I have like this anxiety about it because just a lot of anxiety in general. I don't know. But then, like in the dream, she's like, you know what? I'd rather not introduce you as the guy that I'm dating. Why don't you just introduce yourself as my friend? We're going to use this magic spell. It's going to turn you into a woman. You're just going to be like one of my, girlfriends or whatever. Just play it cool. Act like you're a woman. You're going to look like a woman. So just do that thing. And then I'm just like this awkward woman, and I can actually see myself in the mirror, which a lot of people can't look in the mirror in their dreams. I can, apparently. I would say 99% of the time I'm in first person. So I never see myself in my dreams unless it's in a mirror, which is rare. But in this time, and I had this like stupid haircut that was just like chopped off at the bottom. And then she sort of like goes off to like talk to her family or whatever. And then like one of her cousins or friends or whatever, like this guy starts like flirting with me, and it's just like really annoying. And I'm just like doing this for her because I'm just like, well, this is what you want me to, like, I have to pretend to be a woman at your family reunion, and I got to put up with this, and this is this guy's just annoying, but I also don't want to be mean. But like and then I woke up, and that was like it. I just thought that was so funny, and usually my dreams aren't funny like that, but that it was almost like a little skit. And so I was happy that it was that coherent.
I haven't had like a properly lucid dream in a long time, but I've recently been having these dreams where it would be like a sequence of like my psyche or whatever it is trying to convince me of some story. It's usually like you need to do something or you need to run away from something. There's like some dramatic plot that is supposed to be compelling, and it's a little over the top when I realize it's a dream. And immediately, the moment I realize it's a dream, I kind of feel like the whole... I'm just not engaged in this. I'm like, this is bullshit. This is a dream.
Yeah.
And I feel like the whole reality of that dream kind of go like, okay, sure, that's a dream, totally. And then a different scenario is proposed. And for a minute or two, they fool me again, and I go through the motion of that storyline. I go, wait a second, this is not real, is it? And they're like, okay, yeah, you got this one right too. And then, like, the one that I do remember now is there was like a sequence of these things, like 5 or 6 stories like that, where I managed to not, to see through the bullshit, and it's all like there are like some emotional hooks, like it's this one is scary, or this one is this one is that. And the one that I did get to me in the end was jealousy. I saw my girlfriend sort of flirting with this guy, and there's some weird shit going on, and I got emotionally like involved in it, and then I woke up and felt kind of shitty about that. Like you've
because you fell
you were
for
so
it.
good. Yeah, because I managed to not fall for it like 5 or 6 times in a row, and then just like the simplest, it was not even like a complex, interesting, storyline where it's like this and like that, and it was compelling because no, it's just like this is a thing that you can be made anxious about, and this is the little hook that did
You
work.
buy into it, yeah. Yeah, I get some really vivid things. Like I can feel everything in my mouth. So like, the other cliche is like the teeth falling out thing.
Uh-huh.
Like I can always feel, no, I would say I have this probably once a month, where like I'll have the dream where like my teeth are loose and I'll start to flick the bottom of my tooth and I'll feel it coming out of my gums, and then I'll push it back in. And oh no, this isn't good. But then I'll think, well, wait a minute. I mean, this is the most vivid feeling possible, but maybe it's not even real. But it feels as real as it ever did. When I was,
Right.
I don't know, in 3rd grade or whatever, sort of like pulling my teeth out. I remember there would be a tooth that was like hanging by like a little bit of tissue that I would actually turn around, and I would turn this. She was trying to get the tissue to snap. It's like yanking it. And those sensations, like I've retained, like I can feel all that, like it's a real thing happening to me in my dreams, and it's the worst. But other than that, things aren't very vivid. Like I don't really feel sensations on my body and stuff.
Yeah, I think that's true for most of
But in my
dreams.
mouth, it's all there.
Huh.
I can drink stuff.
Interesting.
I don't taste it very much, but I can drink stuff. I can eat stuff. Yeah, I don't
Interesting.
know. I wish that wasn't as vivid.
There's a book that I, like most books, I started and really liked it and then didn't finish. Called Tibetan Yoga of Dream and Sleep. And it's, this Tibetan Buddhist teacher explaining this ancient practice that they have. And they learn how to be lucid in dreams, develop the skill of being lucid in dreams as a way to become kind of lucid in waking life. And their whole metaphor, their whole approach is there's not a difference between the dream world and the waking world in this sense. Both are illusions, both are kind of games of mind. And the practice, the goal of the practice, as far as I could understand it, is, within their tradition, they think that when you die, you go through like a sequence of, you could say, dreams, right? The experiences, vivid experiences that if you haven't practiced, if you haven't developed the skill of recognizing that this is just a game of mind, then you'll be convinced that whatever you see is what is happening, and that's how you get into the next rebirth.
Oh, okay.
Like you get fooled into a new reality, and then it becomes your reality. And what you need to do is to develop throughout life, to develop the skill to learn how to recognize that everything is just appearances created by not even your mind, but I guess in their sense, just general, just mind universally.
Okay.
And then you'll be able to, when you die, you'll be able to recognize, okay, this is not real. This is again something that the mind is producing, and then that's a path to liberation, to getting out of the whole simulation.
Okay. My battery on my camera just died. Yeah, I don't know. What's the book called?
Tibetan Yoga of Dream and Sleep. It's like a manual. I think that's why I didn't finish it, because it's like it was interesting, but then the more it became like, do this every day, here's the exercise, the less likely I was to continue with it.
Yeah. And also, I mean, it's kind of hard to test that. But I don't know. Whenever I realize that I'm dreaming, I have nothing but contempt for everyone in the dream. Because they want to get me to do something, and I say, no, I don't have to do that. Like, it's cool. Like, you're just part of my mind. And they say, oh yeah, you're right.
I have different kinds of characters, like types of characters in the dream. And the ones that want me to do things, they feel like sort of like Agent Smith in The Matrix. Like, none of them even have a personality, really. It's, it's these. I can see, I can feel a certain kind of agency behind them, but it's not this. This character is bullshit. They're all controlled by the same.
Just like cutouts or something.
Parts of the psyche. But then apart from those, there are characters, some that feel just like me. Like if it was a computer game, these would be like other players. And then there are characters who are definitely part of the dream world, like a very colorful, specific kind of character, but they, do feel like a unique, interesting entity to interact with. And but my point is that the feeling that you describe, as you said, you feel nothing but contempt for all of these characters because they want you to do things. Mm-hmm. To me, that's a subset of characters.
I got you.
And those I do get annoyed with, yeah. But there are, and they actually, like, I remember a dream where, like, it started as not lucid, and it's all this, like, escape from the police or something. There's, all this there's shit that I need to do because there's danger or whatever. Yeah. And I slowly gain lucidity. And as I gain lucidity, I realize that I don't need to be afraid of these, SWAT teams following me. And as soon as I realized that, the SWAT teams changed their strategy from trying to scare me into just talking very loudly so that I couldn't communicate with other characters.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
And that's kind of like characteristic of this kind of, I guess it's like a part of my psyche that is just sabotaging clear thought and communication and understanding. And within the dream, it's like these characters that want me to play this fucking game of running away from something or being engaged in some kind of a bullshit story. But apart from that story, there are, at least sometimes, other things to do. There are other characters to talk to, mm-hmm. or, if I just fully realize it's a dream, then I can come up with shit to do in a simulation like this that I can control.
Yeah.
But there's this part of my psyche, manifested in these characters that is just trying to distract or scare or just somehow make clear thought more difficult.
Okay. But when you, like, if you change it, because, like, when if I try to change the dream, like, if I know I'm dreaming and I try to control everything, I'll just wake up. So I try to, like, just sit back and say, like, okay, so what do you got for me? Let me see. Like, I want to be surprised. I want my own mind to surprise my own mind, because that's when it's compelling. Otherwise, if I do too much, it just stops being a dream. Mm-hmm. Do you relate to that or no?
It does. That kind of thing does happen, but it's, I'm not like a really practiced lucid dream. Like, I can't say that I have a skill really. I try to pay attention, and the more I pay attention to dreams generally, the more likely I have to have lucid dreams. But so that there's like a spectrum there, and
well, I've often wondered where I am on that spectrum, because I don't know how to compare my own state of consciousness to someone else's, because someone could say,
Right,
"Oh no,
right.
that thing you've been doing, that's not lucid dreaming. That's not what we're
Right,
referring
right.
to."
No,
when
but
we-
I mean, there's a spectrum for me, like the spectrum of like
I
some,
gotcha.
I can have a fully lucid dream where, like on the one end of the spectrum, I'm fully lucid. I totally understand this is a dream, and I can control everything, and I'm, very, whatever I want happens. And on the other end of the spectrum is just no awareness. I'm going through whatever storyline is given to me, but there are all of these stops in between, and there are even closer to that part of the spectrum where it's lucidity. There are my favorite ones are where I understand it's a dream and I have a little bit of a degree of I sort of can do magic. I can do little things with reality, but there's other shit going on. There are characters to engage with. There are there's stuff to engage with.
Mm-hmm.
There was one dream that it was the same dream that I was just talking about, where I realized it's a dream, and then the characters that were trying to scare me changed their strategy towards just distracting or prohibiting me from talking to others. Within that dream, there was this really interesting moment to me where it was this long drawn out thing where with adventures and going, different kinds of stages. And I would, sometimes my trajectory would intersect with these other characters who are like me. Most of them were people I know in real life, and we would just catch up, what have you been up to in the last half hour? And then at one point I found myself in some kind of like underground thing. So it was like a place to hide from all of these entities that are trying to either talk too loudly so that I can't think properly, just the forces that distract. And I was there. It was me and a few other characters who were clearly like sort of fairy tale characters, each very colorful, each clearly not anybody I know in real life, but a distinct kind of entity. And they had this problem that they formulated something. It was something like each of us is something like a sentence or a message, and we don't even know what that message is. So each of them I could ask. So what I was doing is I would like ask that guy, so what's your thing? And they would give me like a phrase, and I go, huh? And what's yours? And they would give me a phrase. And I was their hope to like explain what it means, because I could talk to each of them and I could relate to that phrase, while they, to them it was just like the way I understood it is like if a simple program could just give you the code of that program. It's like I'm a thing. Everything that I do, my whole existence is this like one loop, and I don't know the meaning of that loop. And I could like hear that thing that is their entire being and compare it to others, and hopefully I could like come up with some kind of meaning to explain it to them, or learn something about this myself. And I didn't succeed at any of that, because we had to run further, because those distracting forces did get to us. Yeah. And that dream ended. It was like this long adventure with different chapters, and at the end I found myself in some kind of like a city in a desert, and there were characters who felt like their nature is similar to mine. They're like, human beings that you can converse with and everything, but they looked weathered, like they're older, they've been here longer. And there was this like tall table, and they were standing at this table just drinking beer. And I approached them with all this enthusiasm, like there's crazy shit that's been happening to me, and I'm trying to understand the nature of this reality and this and that, and what do you think about this? And they just looked at me like, we don't care. We've been here a long time. We're just fucking taking a break here. And they had no sympathy to my enthusiasm about like figuring out the nature of reality. There's nothing to figure out, just have a beer.
Yeah, I like that one. That's something that would work well in a story. You know, if you could, you know, draw it out or something. I think I'm going to do a series of videos where I try to animate some dreams. I did grab this book. Back when I was, you know, really into the 24-hour comic things, I discovered this guy. That's a dream. Like that's a dream sequence, and it's all like pointillistic.
I like that.
It's a lot of like blobs and just like the back of people's heads and stuff, which feels pretty accurate to me. And then in this one's called Everybody Gets It Wrong, where one of the stories is him ranting about how everyone does dreams in third person when most of them should be in first person. And so he does another thing on that. But yeah, I mean, anything you can do to render it, I'm going to see what I could do, because I might just do it through the framing that I told you about before, where it's just a character monologuing about stories rather than the stories themselves. So maybe I could just have a character who just talks about dreams, you know?
That could be good. Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah. I have a lot of limitations at this stage just with drawing. Like for me to sit down and draw out a story, it'll take forever, and there'll be a lot of like tracing or figuring out some crutches.
For sure. Well, yeah, I mean, we could probably collab on something. I could probably help you out with, you know, a project or something that if you have an idea. And let's just kind of let's wrap this up for now. But yeah, keep it in mind. But yeah, think about that, and you know, thanks again for talking to me.
Yeah, it was fun.
Yeah, this is good. This is a lot longer. This is about an hour and a half longer than I thought it was going to be. So that's good.
Now there's editing in front of you.
I'm not going to edit it.
Okay.
I'm just going to put it up as is.
All right, that sounds good too.